ultimate super hatches cost a lot to run. In Peugeot's 308 GTI, you won't be far off that level of performance and with promised handling that enthusiasts will love. Yet, thanks to a light, high-tech EMP2 chassis and a downsized 1.6-litre turbo engine, you get a sensible set of running costs. It's a tempting package.
Peugeot has a strong history in family hatch-sized hot GTI contenders, and here's one of the most potent ever. A 308 GTI model that produces up to 270 brake horsepower and is ready to do battle in the sector with key contenders like Ford's Focus ST and the Volkswagen Golf GTI. It's good to see the brand back with a potentially credible contender in this segment. Having established its hot hatch credentials with the 205 GTI of 1984 and followed up this iconic model in the 80s and 90s with a string of other memorable shopping rockets, the company rather lost its way after the turn of the century when it came to cars of this kind. In recent years, though, the marque's specialist Peugeot Sport division has been showing signs of a return to form with the introduction of cars like the 208 GTI and the RCZR. Have they worked their magic here again with this 308 GTI? Well, we'll see. Two variants of this model are being offered, one with 250 brake horsepower and the other with 272 brake horsepower. Both, though, managed to deliver more performance than rival Golf GTI or Focus ST hot hatches, thanks in no small measure to this Peugeot's superior power-to-weight ratio. As a result, this car can almost boast enough firepower to take on pricier shopping rockets with 300 brake horsepower or more, contenders like Audi's S3 or Honda's Civic Type R. It's all quite promising. All the competitors I've mentioned so far, though, have 2-litre turbo engines. You might reasonably wonder, as we do, whether this 308 can actually deliver all it needs in taking on these cars with a smaller turbocharged 1.6. Is Peugeot really back up to speed with what buyers in this segment want? And is this anything like the drive of your life that the company's adverts used to promise? Time to find out. So, what have we here? A hot hatch with the lower running costs of a super mini shopping rocket, yet performance that approaches that of a potent, pricey super hatch. All for the price of an ordinary Golf GTI or Ford Focus ST. Well, that's what Peugeot is claiming anyway, and at first glance the facts seem to stack up. This 308 GTI weighs in at just 1,205 kilograms. That's just a kilogram more than a little Renault Sport Clio, which would cost you about the same to run. Yet this pug has teeth too, potentially able to boast a better power-to-weight ratio than a much pricier and more powerful Volkswagen Golf R in the super hatch sector above. Get basics like these right and you're certainly off to a good start. The lightweight EMP2 platform that makes these stats possible obviously helps when it comes to getting this car off the mark. The acceleration figures varying slightly depending on which of the two 308 GTI variants you choose. Both are front-driven and feature the same 1.6-litre THP petrol turbo engine that PSA co-developed with BMW, a unit Peugeot already uses in a lesser 205 brake horsepower state of tune in its 308 GT warm hatch model. 308 GTI buyers get this power plant with 250 brake horsepower in the entry-level GTI 250 variant we're trying here, where it's enough to take you to 62 miles an hour in 6.2 seconds. If you want more, the top GTI 270 model gets the 272 brake horsepower version of that same unit that Peugeot first showed us in its impressive RCZR Coupe. With this power plant, you're looking at getting to 62 miles an hour in 6 seconds dead, which is around half a second quicker than direct rival Golf GTI or Ford Focus ST models can manage. If you're fortunate enough to try both 308 GTI variants back-to-back, then you won't notice much of a straight-line performance difference, which is hardly surprising given that both engines develop the same 230 Nm torque figure, and incidentally go on to reach the same 155 miles per hour top speed. The GTI 270 variant will have an advantage through the bends though, thanks to stickier Michelin Pilot Supersport tyres and a Torsen limited slip differential that helps you get the power down. This top variant also gets more powerful brakes, clamped by 4-piston calipers that sit in larger, lightweight 19-inch alloy wheels. And it provides GTI bucket seats to keep you from sliding about with all this extra grip on offer. Don't be dismayed though if budget or prudence limits you to the lesser GTI 250 version that we're trying here. Apart from the additions I just mentioned, this variant has been developed with the same painstaking precision as its pricier stablemate. So it rides 11mm lower than a 308 model normally would and features resized anti-roll bars, upgraded dampers, a front track that's 10mm wider than standard and more negative wheel camber on both axles. Plus you get a set of springs that are 60% stiffer at the front and 100% stiffer at the rear. This in comparison with Peugeot's already supposedly sporty 308 GT. The result is a car that, as expected, feels dramatically different to any other 308 model you might have driven. It's not the kind of enthusiast-orientated setup that's geared for the occasional track day. For this, Focus ST would be a better choice. But the Peugeot Sport engineers were aiming for a more day-to-day usable balance than that, and we think they got pretty close to achieving it. Power through a set of your favourite back road twists and turns in this car, and you'll find the soft at the front and stiff at the rear setup actually very effective. Body roll is well controlled, plus there's plenty of cornering bite from the sticky Michelins, brilliant lateral grip mid-bend and plenty of exit traction too. In fact, the only real disappointment here is a slight vagueness in the steering feel. If the French development team could dial this out during the car's evolution, then, well, we think it'd be better still. Like all really well-developed hot hatches, this one makes you feel you're a better driver than you actually are, especially in GTI 270 guys, where that Torsen limited slip diff does an effective job in shuffling torque around between the wheels through the bends. The system operates quite subtly, although, like the Golf GTI's similar VAQ setup, it requires a loss of traction on one wheel before being able to send power to another that still has it. Yes, power. Now, on paper, you might think this car's use of a 1.6-litre engine in a class where almost everyone else has a 2-litre turbo might put it at something of a disadvantage. On the road, though, there seems to be no issues in that regard. This 1,598cc unit pulling strongly from 1,900 RPM all the way up to 5,000 RPM. It sounds good too, or at least it does if you press this sport button down behind the gear stick. Now in this drive setting, the engine note is amplified and embellished using a sound symposer beneath the dash and channeled to your ears via the stereo speakers. To be frank, some systems of this kind can seem rather fake, and we certainly prefer the extra realism of rival Audi's exhaust-based setup. But this one we think has oral credibility and certainly gets you in the frame of mind to enjoy this Peugeot's less artificial attributes. In the sport setting, you also get sharper throttle response and the instrument dials are turned from white to red. Although that does mean that when you're in the mood to take the rev counter to the red line, you can't see the red line anymore. But as I've already suggested, you don't have to thrash this engine too much to make meaningful progress. Nor is there an overriding need to row the gear lever around the 6-speed box, which is just as well, as the throw is rather overlong. Even through quite tight corners, you rarely need to use second gear. Third and fourth are sufficient for rapid secondary road progress. Talking of transmission, it'll be a slight disappointment for some buyers to learn that, as with the rival Ford Focus ST, this is a manual-only model, so no paddle shift auto gearbox option of the kind that a very high percentage of Golf GTI buyers take up. If Peugeot really wants to get on terms with Wolfsburg's class leader, it'll have to correct this oversight. Finally, there are two more fundamentals that any brand must nail in a car of this kind. The first is a ride quality balance that's supple over the bumps without inducing body roll through the corners. Despite its lack of the kind of sophisticated multi-link rear suspension boasted by its Golf and Focus rivals, this Peugeot does pretty well here, dealing effectively with broken surfaces while still delivering the eager cornering characteristics that I was describing before. The other key thing to get right in any hot hatch is the driving position, something that's rather unique in a Peugeot 308. This car's so-called I-cockpit layout means you must view the instrument binnacle above rather than through a steering wheel that's much smaller than normal and set lower down towards your lap. The setup seems strange at first, but you quickly adjust to its advantages as pesky roundabouts become wrist-flick chicanes. It suits the car and the way this GTI makes you feel. There are two schools of thought when it comes to styling a hot hatch like this one. Either you prioritise subtlety, as does Volkswagen's Golf GTI, or you go for the all-out boy racer look, as does Honda's Civic Type R. I mean, it's standard form, this one. You'd have to say that this 308 GTI leans towards the less shouty end of the spectrum. But if that's a little boring for you, then your dealer will steer you towards the optional Coupe Franche paint finish. This diagonally split two-tone look makes it appear as if the front of a red 308 GTI has been welded to the back of a dark grey one, if that's your sort of thing. That Coupe Franche paint job is exclusive to the top 270 version, a derivative distinguished by a package that's optional on this lesser 250 variant, namely 19-inch Carbone alloy wheels with red-painted Peugeot Sport brake calipers. Otherwise, the two GTR models are pretty much identical, both featuring a ride height lowered by 11mm and both only offered in this 5-door hatchback body style. And you don't get the 3-door option that would be offered on a rival Golf GTI or, say, at Leon Cupra, nor can you choose the kind of estate variant that Ford makes available on its Focus ST and Peugeot itself offers to buyers of its lesser 308 GT model. As for the detail styling enhancements that set this GTI model apart, well, I'll guide you through those now. At the front, full LED headlamps with dual-like daytime running light strips flank this GTI grille that features red Peugeot lettering and this checkered flag design. Lower down, this large air intake is fashioned in the same style and surrounded by LED indicators and a strip finished either in chrome or, as here, in red. There are also two spoilers beneath the bumper to try and emphasise the ground-hugging stance. It looks smart in profile too, even with the smaller 18-inch Diamant alloy wheels fitted to the 250 model that we're trying here. It's from this perspective that you might notice that the 308 has slightly more compact dimensions than you'll find on major rivals. At only 4.25 metres long, it's fully 12 centimetres shorter than the Focus ST, and it's shorter than the Golf GTI too. Still, the aesthetics do much to disguise this. Moving back past the pebble-shaped black door mirrors with their neat built-in LED turn lights, two strong character lines flow into a toned triangular rear three-quarter panel that sits above subtly bulging rear haunches. The slim rear screen looks smart too, as do the small but intricately formed rear light clusters that, when lit, illuminate a distinctive three-lion claw visual signature. And this car's ground-hugging qualities are underscored by a gloss black extractor incorporating two ample exhaust pipes. Of course, as usual, what's really important is the stuff that you can't see, namely the modular EMP2 platform that all 308 models sit upon, and which accounts for this car's significant weight advantage over all its direct competitors. It's a chassis so sophisticated that it requires no fewer than 116 patents. Time to step across the aluminium GTI branded door sill finishes and take a seat behind the wheel. Inside, in this 250 variant, we're not sure if Peugeot has done quite enough to differentiate this GTI model from commoner 308s. If we'd opted for the pricier 270 derivative, the GTI atmosphere would have been a little more overt, thanks to the deep, grippy GTI bucket seats you get in that version. And for that reason, those chairs represent an option worth having. To be fair, even the standard Peugeot Sport branded sport seats look quite smart, thanks to leather effect and Alcantara red stitch trim. There's more red stitching on the Mistral leather steering wheel with this item, and the GTI floor mat's the only real giveaways that you're in this priciest 308 model. Now, Peugeot calls this at-the-wheel design its I-cockpit, and if you're not familiar with that, then four things immediately become apparent once you get acquainted. Quality, lack of button clutter, the big centre dash LCD infotainment screen, and most notably the tiny steering wheel above which, rather than through which, you're supposed to view the instruments with their finely sculpted red needles. Let's start with that, part of an arrangement that was first seen on the smaller 208 Super Mini, but more effectively delivered here because it's easier to see the high-mounted dial pack above the wheel rim. Yes, it is a bit of a culture shock. Yes, you will eventually get to like it. And yes, you should ignore whinging journalists who don't. With that issue out of the way, you can start to look around the cabin and try and appreciate what Peugeot has tried to do with the interior of this 308. Prior to the arrival of this GTI model, possibly the most interesting interior feature lay in the fact that the iCockpit's rev counter needle goes backwards, racing a counterclockwise arc in Gallic defiance of pretty much every other car in the world. Buyers also get an aluminium gear bob that looks nice but is rather large and will feel freezing on a winter's morning. You can't fault the finishing though. Plenty of soft touch plastics and cool chrome finishes, ensuring that the quality is a cut above that of, say, a rival Ford Focus ST, if not quite up to the standard of a Golf GTI. Jump into this model after familiarisation with a Golf or a Focus and you'll wonder where all the buttons have gone. There's a small central cluster of them in front of the gear stick for locking, for the heated rear window and the hazard lights, but that is about it. Otherwise, everything has been relocated to this 9.7-inch colour LCD touchscreen that dominates the centre of the fascia. Whether you think that this is a good thing will depend on your point of view. I mean, the functions aren't as immediately intuitive as the usual knobs and dials, of course, and personally, we'd have separated the ventilation controls back out onto the dash. It is a bit annoying, after all, to have to switch screens and jab away at a touchscreen every time you want to tweak the fan or alter the cabin temperature. Having said that, the setup works well once you're used to it, featuring sat-nav as standard, along with access to vehicle settings, Bluetooth phone functions, a DAB stereo system, and a selection of optionally downloadable Peugeot Connect apps. To activate and select from these, you'll need to pay an annual subscription, which gets you a so-called plug-and-play 3G key that slots into the USB port that you'll find ahead of the gear stick. You'll then be able to get yourself apps telling you everything from the nearest parking space to traffic information, weather and tourist tips. The Coyote app's worth downloading too, a crowd-sourced warning system that briefs you on highway hold-ups, danger points and speed traps already encountered by over 2 million other road users. That only leaves cabin practicalities. Now, as often happens in French cars, much of the glove box space is taken up with a fuse box, although the area is air-conditioned to keep drinks and sweets cool in summer. There are door bins that can take a large 1.5-litre water bottle, and you get a lidded storage area just between the front seats, and that's just behind a deeper cubby with a sliding top. Smaller items like phones can be hitched up to the various connectivity points just in front of the gear stick, and there's another open storage box down to the right of the steering column by your knee. Finally, we should mention the fact that you have to have an electric parking brake. That's not normally a feature that we're in favour of. This one, though, is automatic and disengages without requiring a push, which is a big plus in its favour. Time to take a seat in the back. Now, you'd expect this area of the car might be a little more cramped than the class norm, given dimensions that are relatively compact by class standards. We'll pull back one of the wide opening doors and see. Once inside, it's certainly apparent that there's slightly less space than you get in a Focus or a Golf, especially when it comes to room for your knees and legs. Fortunately, the difference isn't huge thanks to this 308's decently lengthy 2.62 metre wheelbase and short rear overhangs that make the most of those compact dimensions. It all means that here, as usual in this class, there's reasonable space for two adults who get the use of dedicated overhead reading lights and a centre armrest with twin cup holders. Three folk will be a touch cramped though, thanks to the kind of rather high central transmission tunnel you'd think you wouldn't need on a front-wheel drive hatch. Specify your car with the optional full-length Cielo glass roof we have here, and there's the bonus of an airy-feeling atmosphere, although the downside is the way the arrangement robs taller passengers of those last few millimetres of headroom. Moving from people space to package room, let's consider the boot, which is accessible via a low-loading sill and a wide opening. Now, how can the smallest car in its segment still offer the largest trunk? Answers on a postcard, please. In total, there's 470 litres on offer back here, provided you include the useful 35-litre underfloor section with its divided storage compartments in that calculation. On this 250 model, you get a proper space-saver spare wheel here. Go for the 270 variant with its larger 19-inch rims, and annoyingly that feature gets replaced by a fiddly tyre repair kit. Overall, we're talking here of a space 25% bigger than that of a Golf GTI and a whopping 50% roomier than that of a Focus ST. Now, if you really need to maximise that trip to IKEA, you can use the provided ski hatch or fold the 60/40 split seats down completely and realise the full 1,309 litre maximum loading capacity. No, the seats don't fold fully flat, the backrests simply flop onto the seat bases, but given the amount of space that's delivered, it seems churlish to grumble. If you do need more and you don't mind compromising on power, then Peugeot provides an SW Estate version of this car in lesser GT form, although there you'll find the 1.6 litre turbo engine detuned to 205 brake horsepower. Two 308 GTI models are on offer, the variant we've been testing here being the more affordable standard version with 250 brake horsepower, 18-inch wheels, and a price tag that at launch required a budget of around £26,500. Now, if you can afford around £1,600 more and can stretch your budget to just over £28,000, then you'll be able to get yourself the top 270 brake horsepower model, which includes Torsen limited slip differential technology, bigger brakes and lighter 19-inch Carbone wheels. In both cases, you're limited to manual transmission, just as you would be in a rival Ford Focus ST. So there's no paddle shift automatic gearbox option, as there would be on a rival Volkswagen Golf GTI or Seat Leon Cupra. Is this GTI worth its premium over Peugeot's existing 308 GT model, a car that uses the same 1.6 litre turbo engine, albeit in a lower state of tune? Well, we think so. Go for the more affordable of the two GTI variants, as we have here, and you're looking at having to pay only around £1,500 more than you'd need for the equivalent GT derivative. And in return, you'd be getting more equipment, an extra 45 brake horsepower, and a far more focused drive. Now, time for a bit of detail on the value proposition that this 308 GTI's pricing represents. Now, can it be coincidental that at launch, the top 270 brake horsepower version of this car was priced pound for pound exactly against the Volkswagen Golf GTI? Well, surely not. You might think this to be an ambitious stance for Peugeot to take against the established class leader, until you look at the detail. And most Golf GTI customers pay another £1,000 for a performance pack that boosts that car's power to 226 brake horsepower. But even that's not enough to equal the speed of the lesser 250 brake horsepower 308 GTI model that we're trying here. If you were to then spec a Golf GTI to match this Peugeot, you'd easily be looking at £31,000 or £32,000 asking price for that Volkswagen, against the £26,500 that Peugeot asked for this 308 in 250 brake horsepower form. Now, quite a difference, especially if you conclude that this French contender offers a more involving drive. All right, so Peugeot has put one over on Volkswagen from a value point of view. But you might think this car would struggle in that regard when the comparison focus turns to the other key contender in this segment, Ford's Focus ST. After all, with that Focus, you get 247 brake horsepower for under £23,000. But again, everything isn't quite what it seems. That sum only buys you a stripped-out entry trim level that hardly anyone ever wants. For the purposes of realistic comparison against this Peugeot, you'd need to be looking at the Focus ST in mid-range ST2 spec, a car priced within £2,000 of this 308 GTI 250 derivative. If you're going to pitch the Focus ST against a 308 GTI 270 variant, then for a fair comparison, you need to add a couple of things to the Ford. First, a higher ST3 trim level, and second, to match that top Peugeot's level of performance, the Mount Tune upgrade pack that Ford offers to boost the Focus's power to 271 brake horsepower. Both these things would then leave that Focus ST priced very similarly to a 308 GTI 270. At which point, you might start taking into account that the Focus costs significantly more to run. Are there other 5-door family hatch-sized shopping rocket alternatives in the £25,000 to £30,000 bracket that you could consider? Well, yes, of course. If you were looking at this 308 GTI 250 model, well, the same sort of money would buy you comparable performance from a Skoda Octavia VRS 230. But that is a slightly larger, less nimble car. Those checking out a 308 GTI 270 derivative might also want to look at a comparably priced Seat Leon Cupra 290. Both the Skoda and the Seat would cost you more to tax and run, though, as would the comparably performing premium brand models that you could also consider in this bracket at this kind of money. Between £28,000 and £29,000 buys you cars like BMW's 125i M Sport, Mercedes A250 AMG and the Mini Countryman John Cooper Works. Plus, if you were prepared to consider an auto-only alternative, then there's Alfa Romeo's Giulietta Quadrifoglio and Volvo's V40 T5. Peugeot is also hoping that the top 308 GTI model will be seen as being fast enough to steal a few sales from slightly more exalted hot hatches, what we call the 300 brake horsepower, £30,000 price point, where cars like Honda's Civic Type R and Audi's S3 Sportsback sit. A 308 GTI 270 model might be 30-odd brake horsepower down on powerful shopping rockets like these, but the light weight that facilitates this Peugeot's impressive power-to-weight ratio negates a significant part of that difference. If, having driven the 308 after trying the S3 and the Honda, then you agree, then in choosing this car, you're obviously going to be saving £2,000 or £3,000 and getting yourself a more affordable set of running costs into the bargain. Enough with the comparisons. Let's say you're convinced that a 308 GTI is the hot hatch you want. Well then, you're going to need to know just how generous Peugeot has been with the standard spec. So, let's see. The major exterior point of differentiation between the 250 and the 270 308 GTI models lies with these wheels. Now you get 18-inch Diamant alloys on the 250 variant, while on the 270 derivative there are lighter yet larger 19-inch Carbone wheels shod with stickier Michelin Pilot Supersport low-profile tyres, and the rims featuring red-painted Peugeot Sport brake calipers peeping out between the spokes. You don't get a space-saver spare wheel with these larger rims, though, just a fiddly tyre repair kit. Otherwise, the two versions of this car are outwardly identical, featuring a subtle body kit with a lowered ride height and skirts on the sides and under the front bumper. Plus, twin exhausts with a black rear diffuser, a checkered flag-style GTI front grille, tinted rear side windows and full LED headlamps. Inside, the key difference between the two-engine derivatives lies with the seats. In both cases, you get leather and Alcantara red-stitched trim, but in the 270 model, buyers get as standard the grippier Peugeot Sport-branded bucket seats that we'd probably specify on this 250 version as an option. Otherwise, the cabin will be the same, whichever 308 GTI variant you choose. So you'll get a Napa leather-trimmed and red-stitched Mistral steering wheel, aluminium-style pedals and GTI carpet mats. There's also what Peugeot calls a driver sports pack, with a sport button that, when activated, makes the throttle more responsive, amplifies the engine note and changes the instrument panel colour from white to red. Otherwise, the equipment features run to all the items you'd normally find on a top-spec 308, the kind of things you'd expect from a car of this price. So there's a 9.7-inch multifunction colour touchscreen via which you access satellite navigation, a DAB radio, Bluetooth phone compatibility and a reversing camera. There's also a USB input, a trip computer, keyless entry, cruise control, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror and dual-zone climate control. Outside there's all-round parking sensors, a Thatcham Category 1 alarm and power folding mirrors with courtesy approach lighting. As for options, perhaps the most noteworthy one is the extra cost so-called Coupe Franche metallic paint package. This hand-finished option combines an ultimate red finish at the front with nearer black at the back and is a visual marker for the most high-performance Peugeot models. Extroverts who think that a standard model like this one looks a bit too subtle will be quick to tick this box. Other key options include a huge fixed Cielo panoramic glass roof and a seat massaging system. Plus, you can upgrade the infotainment system with a CD player and Peugeot's useful Connect apps package if you want to. On to safety. Now, it's disappointing that Peugeot chooses not to include its driver assistance pack on GTI variants, even as an option. This is standard on the lesser 308 GT model and includes dynamic cruise control, an emergency collision alert system and an emergency collision braking system. Plus, on that car, but not on this one, you've got the option of a City Park automatic parking system that incorporates a blind spot monitoring system. The result is that this GTI lacks the kind of cutting-edge electronic active safety provision that you'll find in rivals. And you have to pay extra for the Peugeot Connect SOS and assistance feature that will alert the emergency services in the event of a crash. At least the safety basics are taken care of, though. So you get twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus all the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control to hopefully ensure that they'll never be needed. The key stat you need here is this one, a curb weight of just 1,205 kilograms. That's incredibly light for a car of this sort, 146 kilograms lighter than a Golf GTI. And in comparison to, say, a Ford Focus ST, the difference is even greater, this Peugeot being a massive 232 kilograms lighter. In other words, a reduction equivalent to the saving you'd probably make if you asked your entire family to get out and walk. Most of that total weight saving has been made thanks to the use of aluminium and various composites in the high-tech EMP2 platform that this car sits upon, with further gains made through things like a tailgate crafted from thermoplastic. Beyond that, all the usual efficiency initiatives have been taken up in the creation of this car. Things like efficient electric power steering and a wind-cheating shape with a sleek 0.28 CD drag factor. Plus, of course, the usual eco start-stop system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. Even the full LED headlights play their part, consuming 50% less energy than conventional halogen lamps. And all of this explains why a 308 GTI looks so good in terms of running cost returns. The figures are identical whether you go for the 250 or the 270 brake horsepower model. Either way, you're looking at 47.1 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 139 grams per kilometre of CO2, which, perhaps not coincidentally, are the exact same stats you get from a Volkswagen Golf GTI. Though remember, that car has only 217 brake horsepower in standard form. Where you really see the difference that this Peugeot's weight saving makes is when you compare its figures against those of a rival Ford Focus ST, a car that'll take you 6 fewer miles on every gallon and puts out 15 grams per kilometre more of CO2, and so will cost you more to tax. What else? Well, the 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty isn't as good as some other rivals offer, and predictably for a hot hatch, insurance will be pricey, rated a Group 34E for either engine. That's up from a Group 26E rating applied to a Peugeot 308 GT model with the detuned 205 brake horsepower version of the same 1.6 litre petrol turbo engine. As for residual values, well, no, you can't expect these to be up to Volkswagen Golf GTI standards, but these days Peugeot is certainly getting there in this regard. Independent industry experts CAP go as far as to call this 308 a game changer in this respect. After 3 years and or 60,000 miles, you can expect this GTI 250 model to be worth around 33% of what you originally paid for it. The Peugeot Sport division seems to be rediscovering a little of its hot hatch magic. The 208 GTI showed us that the company still knew how to build a decent shopping rocket, and this 308 GTR model confirms that belief. For the full fat experience, you really need the GTI 270 version, but even with this lesser 250 variant, there's much to like. True, there are certainly better track cars in this segment, but few of them strike a better balance between competition-style thrills and day-to-day usability. Other things we like include the impressively efficient running costs facilitated by the high-tech EMP2 platform. And the iCockpit's tiny wheel suits light, chuckable handling that's complemented by the Sport Mode button's potent roar. Of course, there are also things we like less about this car. The fiddly infotainment screen, the slightly restricted rear seat space, and the relative lack of some of the very latest active electronic safety features. All of these, though, are things you could easily live with. In summary, what we've got here is a hot hatch certainly good enough to join the notable models in Peugeot's GTI back catalogue, and a shopping rocket accomplished enough to severely frighten a few distinguished rivals too. If you're shopping in this segment, it's one you need to try.